On topics not related to the agenda. Mr. Becker, do you have any comments?
We have a robust group here, but none have chosen to speak.
Yes, I know, I parked halfway down the block.
Blame that on the gymnasium.
Next item on the agenda is Plus Delta Plan for Improvement. Mrs. Holford.
From the January 13th board meeting, we had no deltas.
Next item on the agenda is the presentation by Fisher, and I'm assuming that is going to Mrs. Ferguson.
Hi everybody, and welcome. I'm not sure if to be here, if you feel the need to be on a camera, but I can. If you want. We're kind of number lined off over there, but the camera is rolling. So first of all, let me just thank everyone for coming tonight. And yes, the gymnasium is packed with Fisher Eagle conditioning. Yes. So I wanted to thank, before I forget, even one of our students, Matthew Hendricks, and then Caleb Price. So Matthew was coming just from his sweaty workout, quickly to squeeze in his pledge leadership and then go back to his other leadership. So we thank them for sure. And I guess on behalf of Fisher and South Redford, we want to thank all of you for being here in January, specifically on Board Appreciation Month. We thank everything you do and all the decisions that you make and all the decisions you allow us to make and to do, and those of you that, all the things that you do to support our staff and everybody that works with these little youngsters every day, all the way up through high school. So we thank you so very much. I wanted to just recognize staff that's here tonight, as well as some other families that support us, and then we'll kind of get our sharing underway of what portion of the story we wanted to share with you tonight. So you'll notice we're set up in tables much like we were the last time, and given some of your feedback from when we met last year, actually in March, this time last year, one of the pieces that the board enjoyed was being able to interact with the staff and see what learning is happening. So we have some of that planned for you today, so thank you for being flexible with seating. But I wanted to introduce staff that were here today, that were able to come, and to thank certainly those that even couldn't for all the hard work that they're doing. And so I am going to ask you to stand, staff. You do not need to wave. They have their grade level t-shirts on, so they want. So I'll start with kindergarten right in the center with Mrs. Capitelli and Mrs. Cunningham and Mrs. McCardle. You can stay standing. You do not need to be shy. And additionally on the kindergarten team, Mrs. Sider and Mrs. Trianic. In first grade, Mrs. Gourlay and Mrs. Shackelford. And along with them, Mrs. Shackelford. Mrs. Shackelford is Mrs. Wicker. And in third grade, Mrs. Turco, Mrs. Liptoe, new to third grade this year, and Miss Burke. And in fourth grade, as well as Mr. Kanda, also, Mrs. Driscoll, formerly Miss Shido, Mrs. Mahar, and Mrs. Stevenson. And in fifth grade, Miss Draper, Mr. Chase, and Mr. White. They're sporting their new shirts. They're super excited. Our instructional coach, Mrs. Butler, and face of the front office, Miss King. We also have here from our kids care lead, Miss Tish Donahue. Yeah, she has given us her space this evening with her kids. I'd also like to thank one of our PTO members here tonight, Christine Yang, one of the board members. Yeah, so she's here helping us out. And we just thank you for all that you do. I can't think of a more honorable group of staff and how hard they work for our kids each and every day and take it home with them. So they're going to have an opportunity to share some things with you today that I hope are kind of new to you and you enjoy at this time of year. So along with our continuous improvement story, as we continue each time that we see you and think about our plan and how we continue to develop that, we really wanted to be able to, we've spent a lot of time sharing with you what's happening with literacy, the solutions goals we've had in the past, and that work continues. But we also know how important it is for us to increase our math proficiency, as well as growth on our state and our local assessments. And the local assessments have changed a little bit over the last couple of years. I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that the students take the NWEA, but also as part of Bridges Mathematics, then the students are taking some individual and some unit tests. So what did we need to do to be able to boost our math proficiency and growth? Implement the Bridges Mathematics components daily. So we thank you for all your work in supporting that. For them, staff and students, to learn in professional teams, to take that to students and across the building with both assessments and instruction. And that's happening on a monthly basis. And staff can tell you a little bit about that as you circulate today. But the professional learning is supported by coaching, and we'll continue to do that, as well as the instruction that's in the classroom, rather than just a once and get. It's still been a lot for them to learn, and they've worked very, very hard, and continue to. We then set goals still for school solutions. The last time you were here, last 2 times as the board, we shared with you the structures for SFA, the fact that that was literacy as well as school solutions. Then when you were here last year, we talked about what each of those solutions teams works were doing, such as attendance and cooperative culture and involving families and so on. That work continues, and that work needs to support all of our academic work as well. Sometimes those things can be barriers or can be successes to how we're able to accomplish what we need to. So that work continues underneath all of that. For us to study, if you hit the key right now, it'll just kind of remind us the direction we're going. Thank you. We will then review assessments and instruction for the units, and teachers are working underway to do that now, but there's still some refining going on in those areas, so I mentioned the tests. And then as we act on that work, we'll come back to this, but the adjusting and modeling. Right now we're in year 1 of Bridges. So it really is about keeping the fidelity of what's happening, but there's so much that I'm going to let the staff tell you more about that they've had to learn in different parts of the day. The core instruction, some what you might think of as calendar work, but really is Number Corner, which develops a lot of different mathematical skills, and then also workplaces or workstations, and so much coming from the kids working collaboratively. So then that continues with some instructional planning and pacing right now, and then we're taking a look at what other systematic data do we need to review so that we can continue to monitor how the math progress is going. That's that. So here's where does our data stand? And I know this is something you're a bit familiar taking a look at. So what you have right here is our M-STEP data from last year. So for students typically in 3rd through 5th grade, but when we're talking about growth, it's students in the 4th and the 5th grade because of taking the test for 2 years at a time. The students in the darkest color is a percentage of students that exceeded the expected growth, met above growth, and that's based on a pretty complicated formula. So those are above average growth percentages. And then students in blue who have achieved the expected growth from 1 year to the next. In mathematics, that growth for our students, those 4th and 5th grade students who took the test more than once, was 57% last year. So there's certainly wonderful things to celebrate with growth, but room to grow. So, in thinking about mathematics and what our students need,
So what a lovely picture.
it's very authentic. It was not pre-approved. When you're a millennial, and you need to see your picture right when it happens. I have millions of pictures on my phone, and I really do enjoy getting staff at different points. This is actually, though, a station. So Ms. Mahar's leading a station here. You'll see some examples of what's happening in math at the beginning. I was wondering what the laughter was like. It's all good. You're just talking. But so what? So what means, what do we need to consider besides those other factors outside of mathematics that will guide our student instruction? And there's so much that students need to learn in mathematics and be able to engage in on their own. Very different. When I taught 4th and 5th grade math at Jefferson far too long ago, there was a lot of rote skills and a lot of I teach, you do. When you experience what you experience today, you'll see that it's very, very different for students. And they really do need to be able to be thinkers. So I'm actually going to jump to the 3rd bullet point. Explaining, thinking, and listening to ideas. Our students are taught to do that during literacy, during SFA, certainly in talk moves that kids need to do in science and throughout the day. Hopefully, if you have an opportunity to get within the classrooms, and I know your schedules are vary, but you're going to see more across students, pairs, triads, teams of 4, at least initially. And then there are some independent things kids need to do as well. So these are based on the 8 mathematical practices. Things that we certainly were looking at as a county, as a school district, as a state, prior to even adopting Bridges tools, right? Kids need to build stamina and perseverance. They need to think through a problem. They need to, reason using numbers. I explained the thinking. Then they need to connect math to the real world. There's, some really interesting examples. You were just sharing that one with me today, Mrs. Butler. It was kind of fun, lining up at the airport. You need to know how to line yourself up and know what numbers are in order. Using appropriate math tools. You'll see today, as the teachers provide some experiences for you, the kinds of tools and kids understanding which tools do which jobs in mathematics, right? Students need to be precise. They need to know what's accurate and what's not, and there's some cross-checking they can do with each other and through the teacher's modeling and really experimenting sometimes with what's wrong or if you agree or disagree. And then they need some structure to the mathematics. That's like pretty much all we used to do in mathematics, right? We kind of went right to there. And also make generalizations. Those are all things kids need to do on the M-STEP assessment that they need to do in the real world, and depending on what their life outside of past high school allows, whatever their career or path may be, they're going to need. No matter what technology is out there, there's some of it they're going to need. So that's the direction we've gone, and not just Fisher, but our other elementary schools. So several of our grade levels are here tonight and are ready to give you an opportunity to experience some of the things that the kids do in the classroom without just watching it. Again, you gave us that feedback last time, so we encourage you, we're going to get you started in just a minute, to pull up a chair or stand by. We're going to give you a good 5 minutes or more if we feel like we need to at each of these 5 spots today. That's why the number lines kind of teach people out there. So I won't read those all to you because the teachers, the staff members will tell you when you get to each of those tables. But I invite other participants in the audience, if you'd like to join. It could get a little crowded. But for board members, etc., if about 2 to 3 of you could start in one area, we'd like you to be able to get to all 5 tonight so you can see what's happening. Okay? All right. So with that, pick a place to go. Yeah, you can. Okay. Yeah, for sure. If you want to throw off your numbers.
Just don't throw off your numbers. The one who's like, oh yeah, I'll 20 minutes. And he goes and
Another taker for 4th grade.
All right, can I do this? All right. So, there are, sometimes they pretty much instantly, sometimes absolutely. All right. So it's a lot of things. You can see the answers. So, pick a color, your player one. Then this, would you like to And put it anywhere, or you can take this one and put it anywhere to get the new product.
I love making those, so I'm gonna rely on it, but it's just
All right, time is up. Time to clean up and rotate to another All right, we need some takers at the 5th grade table. I know it's challenging. But if anybody
Well, yeah, if you like your job, right? So,
But the answer has to be here. Oh, okay.
You want to get 4 in a row.
You're making it easy for me.
my birthday? All right.
Product games, like Connect Four, but I'm like, just go for this, not too much already. Or pick up the blue and move it anywhere.
I thought you said
It is Oh no, for sure. Yeah, we She was testing it.
It really is. So then we're going to what?
I believe. take these chips and you put it on any of those factors that you want. And think about which one of these places you want to go. You're gonna get something that so once you agree with it,
It's 48.
someone else gets to do it. All right, so now we're going to 8, move it in.
Strategizing.
So we're not all fighting over the same thing.
Just double the
Or as close as you can.
big time. Oh, yeah. Can I show
But don't do something that could then be good. You know, so I mean, we could really get quite confident.
Played at IOC on Friday, and then I would ask about that would be, I okay, so that they would, you go here, because they would kind of yeah, and then race stuff. So right now, one is already
It's funny, the kids are like, all that time they're silent. But a lot of
There you go, you finally completed one. All right, time to rotate to your final station.
That's what the kids do. Do I keep it for posterity?
Oh, I see.
It's pretty quick to get those out there.
How is it?
We're about to stretch our learning
I know he's really excited about
a factor covered up with those chips, and then come up with another factor to get every one of these answers. Five, four is what this Nine times, so go ahead and blue or green, one's blue, and there are timies out there.
So before we begin, let's make sure everybody has a different color model.
Right down here.
So each person has to have one double
Check if it's and now it's now it's your turn. You only need one. Down player two.
Out so far. Oh, to round it This is our superintendent. Everybody's got a coach, man. He was a principal. Look at us. What a team we make there. Oh my gosh. And that's just a lot. And so many
Right now, you guys got
I was trying to find something that wasn't as obvious. After he said playing 2 steps ahead, I was like, how did I get 49 away from her? Yeah, that's fun. And I knew that's what you wanted. So I was like, I need 49. That's all I'm asking. Yeah, that's exactly what I was. That's fun. That's really fun. And I wouldn't have thought that until you said that. I was like, oh, he's talking to me. I thought that was your subtle hint, like, don't just take the obvious choice. And I was like, all right, let's slow down. It's fun. Yeah, I like the shirts. It's great.
Don't worry about it.
I knew you did pillows, but I didn't know.
Oh yeah, all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome. That's cool. Really cool.
If you guys want to finish this, I'll say it.
I totally thought that you were talking to me like, choose something more challenging.
Go back.
all learned, that's what matters.
That's already
The prize
I know you can get it on this website because Chris will put it.
Oh, okay.
I wonder how many that is though. Is it like a set? I think you get a set for Yeah.
Oh, here she is. She's making it. You're good. I was just looking at her. Well, we really appreciate the opportunity for you to be able to engage with our classroom teachers to see many of the workspaces, extra workshop time, other activities that kids are doing. And a lot of the tools that you see used are built upon depending on what the grade level is. And you did well at all levels, so give yourselves a little pat on the back. Now sometimes that can be a challenge. So the question is now what? After years of Bridges, year one I should say of Bridges, and getting ready to move forward and thinking about those mathematical practices and really moving the achievement up. Like our literacy instruction, like anything else, we need to take a look at refining that. And as I mentioned earlier, the staff is meeting monthly. They're taking the opportunity to meet monthly, sometimes just within the building, sometimes within the grade level across the district, to be able to look at assessments and really talk about, how do I get to these pieces of instruction? I'm sure you know it's a lot to fit into an elementary day, and really just how to put that all together.
Certainly we have the support of the coaches, and we thank you for that. The coaches are to support both literacy and mathematics. And we have had the opportunity to have professional development from adults associated with Bridges to come out and kind of follow the literacy model we had before, rather than just one sit and get. Come on out, see what's happening in classrooms, give us some coaching. So we kind of have the good fortune of people in the district promoting that model of learning, which people need to learn over time. Hopefully I heard as I went around, certainly I took a lot of photos, but I had an opportunity to hear a lot of, and those staff members encouraging you to have the dialogue, right, or support each other's answers, to take a look at what you were thinking. And that's the cooperative piece we're talking about, when kids need to think and learn and hear other ideas. These are some of the strategies used right now in other areas of content. Kids should know how to talk, how to agree or disagree in the sciences, in literacy, in mathematics, and in life. TPS is just a think, pair, share. Stop and think and do this. Think about with you and your partner. That gives the opportunity for a learner who may need more time, who is supported by another, to come back and really see what they know. Random reporter is something we tend to use more in literacy right now. It is that idea of kind of cold calling, but then supporting students by coming back and having the conversation first. So things like that need to continue in our practices to be able to help children support in the mathematics. Then of course we need to continue to build our connections for families. We've only begun in that area, especially with mathematics. A lot of families say to us, we'd love more homework. It's hard to say, well, here, take this game home. Eventually you can. And to be able to have experiences like that, but rather than just having a child sit at home with a piece of paper and do what they need to do. It's a little bit different. And we can do that with technology too, so we need to take a look at some options there. So I'm going to let Mrs. Butler lead us in a Plus Delta today, and we would welcome your feedback. And I'm going to go with that.
Well, I can honestly say this was a whole lot more fun the way I learned it, way more. Really kind of engaging, and yet you're still learning the basics.
What I really liked was the fact that our students are learning and they're also having fun. So that's fantastic.
I love how it's all coming from one curriculum and the teachers don't have to go and invent something new, and it's all coming, all these different ideas and games and grade levels is all in one area, which is super nice, and it's fun. It's all the fun's in one area. So.
And it spirals up and builds up each other.
Yeah.
Fifth grade was a whole lot harder than but I really enjoyed that kindergarten.
Any deltas? No, anything else to add?
Another one was that the way that they give the kids an opportunity to work together as a team, not being a single person on the spot.
Well, and plus too, it was the conversation we had in the first grade, where they had this blank one and we were supposed to figure out where it was, and they had 3 different answers. They all made valid points and said it didn't have anything on it, but obviously I didn't have a blank.
Thank you for joining us in the interactive live experience again tonight. We hope you enjoyed it because we appreciated that feedback from last time, and encourage you to come visit when you can and ask those questions and see our mathematicians at work. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move to recess, I believe the SREA has a presentation they wish to make.
Yes, just really quick. So it was mentioned earlier that January is School Board Recognition Month, and so from SREA we want to say thank you and let you know that a donation to the South Redford Foundation was made in honor of school board recognition.
Thank you. With that, then we will move to, I thought that was what we did. Are there additional board comments? I thought that's what we were doing when we were doing that. Is that correct? That was for board comments?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
If there's more, feel free.
Okay, then we will move to recess at this time at 7:35. We'll have to talk. Okay, we call this meeting back to order at 8:04. And the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have a board member willing to move the consent agenda resolution?
Madam President,
Thank you, Mrs. Fleischer.
I'd like to move the adoption of the following resolution, please.
Do we have support? The movement of the resolution by Mrs. Fleischer, support by Mrs. Tolliver. Any questions, concerns regarding the consent agenda? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the Wayne County discussed, the Wayne County Enhancement Village. And Mr. Baldus, I'm sure you're coming this one.
I sure am, Madam President. So it was about 5 years ago that we as a board talked about whether or not we would support county enhancement village, and of course we did. And just so that to remind everybody what we're talking about is one of the only ways that a school district can increase its operating funds is to go after a countywide enhancement village. And so as a district can't do that on its own, it can only go with the rest of the county. So Wayne County, 4 years ago, put on a ballot 2 mills, and it passed. And so because of that millage, the South Redford gets about $1 million a year. And I'll go over the numbers in a second. But now those dollars are, because it's an enhancement millage, it's the only dollars that a district can use outside of its foundation grant for purchases out of its general fund. So as opposed to a sinking fund millage, which we also have. We have 2 mil sinking fund. Sinking fund dollars can only go to brick and mortar kind of things. Can't go to buying pencils or pens. Can't go to salary. Can't go to anything like that. The other bond that's out there is a construction bond, which is again can only go to brick and mortar things. You know, building things, fixing things, those kinds of things. So the enhancement millage allows us to be able to do things like, I'll give you an example of some things that we've used it for here in Redford. We have the only full day, 5-day preschool in Wayne County, and it's free to those who live in Redford. And so we use our dollars for that. We don't get any money from the state for preschool. That all comes out of our general fund, and because of the enhancement millage, we're able to do that. We also have coaches, learning coaches, that work with our teachers to look at instructional practices and give them the support that they need. We could not do that without our enhancement millage dollars. We have purchased 2 new programs at the elementary school. Success for All was one of those, as well as the new math program, Bridges. We could not have purchased those without the enhancement millage. So we use our enhancement millage dollars to do those things. And there's certainly other things too. But those are some of the bigger things. So Wayne County, actually, every county in the state, except for Wayne County, can go after these millages at any, at any election time. Wayne County is the only county in the state, and there's some politics behind it, but it's the only county in the state that can only go on a presidential year, every other year, I'm sorry. You can only go on what would essentially be even year elections. And so we're currently in year 4 of a 6-year millage. And I'm going to recommend that we ask Wayne County to go after this the enhancement millage renewal in November of 2020. Now this enhancement millage, I said we're in year 4 or 6, won't run out until 21-22. But we certainly want to go after it as a renewal as opposed to having it fall off and then going after it as what would be termed new taxes. And so the percentage rate of the passing is much higher when it's a renewal. So we will be going after it a little bit earlier. So we're lucky enough to be able to have used our enhancement millage for the things I talked about. I don't want to say extra because preschool, I don't think anybody would want to say it's extra, right? I think that's an essential part of our program now. There's a lot of districts in Wayne County that were deficit districts prior to this election, and they're currently using that money to just keep them afloat. And so, it's a very important election in Wayne County, and we have collected, as of this month, we have collected over the last 4 years $5,101,111 that has gone to general fund and has paid for those things that I've talked about. So, in order for this to get on the ballot, districts representing 50% of the students in Wayne County have to ask Wayne County to do that. So it's not 50% of the districts. It's 50% of the districts, it's districts that would equal, I feel like I'm at the 5th grade table again. Enough districts would have to ask Wayne County that if you total up all the sums of their students, would be at least 50%, or would be more than 50% of the total kids in Wayne County. So let me give you an example. If Plymouth Canton asked Wayne County, they would bring somewhere around 18,000 students to the tally. Dearborn would bring somewhere around 20,000 students to the tally. Right? South Redford would bring about 3,800 students to the tally. So, all the districts would have to, if we added up all of their students, would have to equal more than 50% of the students in Wayne County. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, there you go, back to the 1st grade now. But so certainly, we do need districts like Detroit, Plymouth Canton, Dearborn, to be on board with this. I believe most of those districts will. But every single student counts in this. And so I would ask the board to consider, not tonight, but at our next meeting, consider a resolution asking Wayne County RESA to go ahead and put the election on the ballot.
Any questions?
Just for clarification, it's a renewal in your mind. The current one doesn't expire till you said 21-22.
Correct.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then this new renewal would kick in at that point.
22-23. Yep, it would, yes. And then we'd be asking for 2 mills and 6 years again.
Any other questions?
How many other districts are in favor of this?
It's a good question. I can't answer it because superintendents are just now taking this to their boards. So I'm going to guess most, if not all. Again, when the last time we did this, it was new money. So the thought was, if we pass this, then we can add these things, right? Well, districts have now added things, and if we lose that money, and it's a significant amount of money, it's better than $1 million a year for us. And so now, if we lose the enhancement millage, we would be in cutting mode. And so we would have to lose some of the programs I just talked about, because we have to obviously have a balanced budget. And every district in Wayne County is going to be in that same position. So it's going to be the rare district, I think, that doesn't support it.
So they really need to support.
They really do. Obviously, I don't speak for any other community, but I don't know how a superintendent would be able to answer the question of, okay, we're not going to support this, and tell me what you're going to cut so that we can continue to have a balanced budget. I think about the things I need. Would we want to be sitting at this table right now discussing which one of those programs we need the least?
Any other questions?
Madam President? So X district decides not to support it, but it passes in November of 2020. Does X district get the fund?
They do.
Yes.
It's all or nothing.
Brian, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. We're going from 3 mills to 2 mills.
No, we're currently collecting 2 mills, and we'll continue to
I
collect.
thought we were collecting 3 right now.
The enhancement millage is 2.
Oh, I see, not to exceed 3%, okay.
Yeah, that's the law.
Any other questions? Okay, put your thinking caps on and any more questions and thoughts? Next item on the agenda is comments from the audience on topics related to the agenda.
We have none, Madam President.
Next item on the agenda then is our book study, Sticking Points by Hayden Shaw, chapters 12 through 16. Did I miss something? Oh, plus Delta first. Okay, sorry. Mr. Bob, you're not up for this. Plus Delta.
So for tonight's meeting, we'll do a plus delta and see what your input is as to how this meeting supported your learning and information processing and what we could do better. What pluses do you have? Shirley?
I just love the way Amy and her staff gave us all those exercises. And I just want to thank her and her staff for their dedication commitment to our district.
Other pluses?
There's a great turnout of staff, which is really encouraging for us, and to be able to see the inner workings of the new math program was very encouraging.
Other pluses? Are there any opportunities for improvement? Things that could help in this evening?
I just have a comment to thank the PTO for that. That's
Yes.
significant at this time of night.
Yes, thank you.
A lot of behind the scenes folks.
For sure.
next item on the agenda then is book study. I already told you what it was, by who it was, and what chapter. So Mr. Bob, you're on.
All right. Good. Well, before we dive into tonight's chapters, I'm going to ask people to travel down memory lane to our last meeting and put your thinking caps on and see if you recall some of the takeaways that we had talked about from our last meeting. We talked about a number of items in terms of how different generations interact in the workplace, and then we did an activity together. We actually looked at a couple of different photographs as well, and just curious what takeaways people may have had from our last meeting. See if anybody recalls. Anybody recall what we talked about the last time? We broke off into different groups. Let's do a quick recap. What were some of our groups and what were our topics that we talked about last time?
The mindset on how people react to certain characteristics of what people do.
Yes, that was part of it.
Remember the flip-flops. Now that I look up dress code, flip-flops, yeah.
So dress code was one of them. Ways that people communicate, right?
Perceptions that people have about other groups.
Absolutely. The perceptions that people hold about different generations. And then the last one that we do annually, well, all of you do with Brian annually. Evaluation, right? We talked about feedback and how different generations prefer to send or receive feedback. And so we have a little activity with different cards. And so tonight we're going to transition to different topics. And so if you take a look at your packet to stay consistent with what we've done in the past, you have your quick reference guides that you have prior to breaking off into tonight's activities. And so you'll notice on the back of your questions, you have fun at work and how the different generations perceive fun in the workplace. And then you also have your quick little reference guide box when they make some generalizations about how the different generations prefer to have fun in the workplace. And then we're also going to be talking about knowledge transfer tonight and transferring knowledge from one generation to another. And similarly, with your reference guide, you can see how the different generations prefer to transfer knowledge from one generation to the next generation. We're also going to take a quick look at loyalty and how that varies amongst the 4 generations. We're also going to look at meetings tonight and how the 4 different generations view and what they expect from meetings. And then lastly, we're also going to take a look at policies and what the 4 different generations expect from policies and some things to be thinking about with those policies. So those are your quick reference guides to stick with our consistency of how we've traveled through with some of our previous chapters. I do want to draw your attention back to tonight's questions. So we have 5 questions for tonight that are broken down by chapter. And so you'll notice that the questions travel by chapter number. So chapter 12, chapter 13, 14, 15, and 16. So receiving some of your feedback from the last time, I heard the group loud and clear that some of the bonus questions were not always appreciated. And so I removed some of those bonus questions tonight. And so we just really narrowed it down to the essential question for each of our 5 chapters for tonight. And so I'm going to ask that people assemble in the following groups. And so Nicole and Misha, the 2 of you would be so kind to collaborate on fun in the workplace. So you'll have the opportunity to answer question number 12. And last time was very fitting because it was Misha's birthday. And so we figured that we would keep the fun going. It's her birthday month. And then knowledge transfer. If we could have Cheryl and Christine work together on knowledge transfer. And then for loyalty, for question number 14, I would ask that Shirley and Amy partner up on loyalty. And for question 15, I would ask that Mr. Chase, is he coming back? He had to leave. Okay. Would you like to participate? The two of you are welcome to. You don't have to, but if you would be so willing, if you'd be so kind to work with Mr. Baker here on meeting, we would appreciate that. And if not, it's okay. We can be flexible too. Appreciate it.
And I don't bite on Monday.
And then lastly, if Lori and Brian would work on question number 16 together.
Which is, let's see.
If you want to travel with me, you're
I gotta do this again
but
tomorrow.
no obligation. No obligation. So, if you would, feel free to take your snacks and your food with you, and Amy has these great tables for us, so if you want to use the tables, you can. And we will come back together. We'll come back together at 8:30 on the dot. It's 8:24 right now. And we'll see how far we are in 6 minutes.
One and two.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, Shirley, where's my requires the book,
These will hopefully. These are some of the publications that exist on this very topic. So. They're already having fun over here. Not this man. SpongeBob.
All right.
Think about it before you generation, they got to look at it differently.
Oh, yeah.
All the way from traditionals who are like rural.
He perused it.
Yeah.
Still skin and stand.
That doesn't make sense. It's just a suggestion.
Yeah. Or then finished high school. Yeah. So it's very similar.
So that's more
Even in
traditional.
this chart. Yeah, let's create a policy.
Oh, I thought you were putting number one.
And shift our energy to yeah, definition. A grandparent.
On the other hand, we operate under the philosophy, not the policy or something. So we want policies, so we will know what's expected. But we don't want it so tight that
Yeah.
we have a guideline. Right.
There you were.
So in creating policy,
Are you like my husband or your video? That's a video.
I know.
It's true.
Yeah, everyone's-
They're close. Yeah, so
Right.
because they have.
Well, we can do that.
But I don't know, we have, I would just say we have traditionals,
Right, you know, like we still get you at time.
Yeah.
We're getting good. Right. I know. And they understand the process, right?
we sat tonight with,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting. We talk about work life.
I always feel like it's gonna take.
I have to ask,
They
so
are
can I
that-
interject real quick? So you were helping, or any of your friends helping? Serious question.
That is a serious question. Well, it was kind of the.
Draws are flip-flops. Moving the
Yeah, right.
I'm just saying.
That would make my dad crazy.
Over.
Good point.
Moving the sofa.
Oh, my dad. So, question.
So my younger brother, I'm still, my dad has a drive sometimes I have to move something. So I was like, oh, just to try my dad. He's a millennial, like,
Yeah.
so that's why I had to.
And we actually were having a discussion about that. Because there would be more Gen Xers that are with the oldest is
Right.
grandson probably yesterday. Oldest gonna be 21.
Sure.
And
That part of the book is hysterical. Did you read the whole part? That whole part?
Yeah.
How are we doing over here? Any more time?
Oh.
I remember
When things were up.
Any other minute?
You're gonna be at
Reading, thank goodness for the highlights.
So, if I could pull your attention for just one moment. So a couple of groups requested that we take a couple more minutes. So we're at time, but we're going to go ahead and take 2 more minutes. One thing that I would remind the group is think about some of our earlier jumping off points where we talked about the why, right? So when you go back, even if you're ready to share out, make sure that you feel confident that you can articulate why you responded the way that you did to your question. We spent a lot of time talking about the why for the traditionalists, the why for the baby boomers, the why for the Gen Xers, and why for millennials. So try to connect the why to the answer in your question, if you haven't done so already. And then we'll circle together in about 2 minutes.
No, he did not. Not at all. Back in math class.
So why?
I feel like even
So
Why do these people feel that way?
No.
Is that what he's asking?
So what recommendations should organizations consider when structuring their policy? So,
Yeah.
I think we would. We would.
Maybe you go like, you turn off, or what do you get?
Isn't that crazy? And then also have So why? Because it's clear direction. They want to know.
Yeah.
They have a question, it's just like we said, they go on YouTube or whatever, so it's really right for them. Or they'll say, well, I've come in and I've done research, and this is what's covered. Right. Yeah. So if they post a question.
I think also including.
I never did that. I know.
I would.
Yeah, and they want to come they're locked in the door. Oh, yeah.
And that's what our organization like, and then they're just like, pursue something.
I'm gonna go
So go ahead and take 20 seconds to wrap up your conversation, and then we'll come together as a whole group.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Misha and Nicole. And if they would be so kind to start us off with fun in the workplace.
So why do the 4 generations define fun at work differently? Each generation had different expectations, therefore you get a different outcome. So their life held different expectations, so therefore work had to mold that expectation of their life. And then it evolved backpacking off the following generations to their changing generation to generation as time and our life evolved. Then the fun at work evolved with the mentality. Describe how each generation prefers to make the workplace fun. The traditionalists with the hour-lax, once the work is done, they basically couldn't have fun if their work wasn't done because they wouldn't have anything to prosper with to have fun. So their mentality was, we need the work done or we're not going to have fun because we're not going to have anything. The baby boomers, the work itself is fun. That's when they got into the whole, we're going to have, families and support the families and do the mortgages. And so they're basically like, it's fun to support your family. It's fun to have a life. It's fun to be able to work and pay your bills and be stable. The Gen Xers, it's work. Quit trying to make it something that it's not. It's basically like, do your 9 to 5. Yeah. It's basically like they're gonna have fun because they have a job. They're okay with their job. They're always gonna have a job because they can get a job, and they know that it's not that big of a deal. It's basically like we're gonna have fun, and we know we're gonna have fun, so work is just work. With the millennials, it's more I'll get more done if we have fun. I like in the book it said that the millennials don't like the hype, they like the fun. So basically, like they like real fun. If you force fun on us, it's just kind of like pathetic. It's just like, that's not fun, and it's like really annoying that you're trying to force fun on us. When it's it's just like you'll get more done because it's just like the anxiety is gone, the stress is gone. Like you have that little pocket to release everything, and then instead of working and thinking about this one section of work you have to be getting done, and then really you're just stressing and having anxiety, and that takes 30 minutes to get a 2-minute thing done at work. That little pocket of fun is the millennials' way of like, okay, we really, really like de-stressed and had fun, and now it's the productivity that is now benefiting because you just, are now more relaxed to work better, faster, and that will express in the book.
Nicely done.
Very good.
Well summarized. Misha, anything you want to add? Does anybody?
Still celebrating her birthday.
That's right. It's her birthday month.
I will say this. My cousin works at Quicken Loan, and it is just ridiculous. I had anxiety because they do dance breaks, and there's like a whole floor with beer and wine, and it's a basketball court. It was great, but I don't need that every 15 minutes.
Beer and wine.
You know what I mean? So dance break, and everybody is like, I'm like, what is going? It was just really weird. It was good for them, I guess. There were a bunch of young people. And they're like, and jumping around dancing, and they come back and get their work done in like 20 minutes, and then go back. So that's all day there. But it keeps them there. Those people work like 10 to 12 hours a day. Because it's wonderful. The way they have different chairs and couches and lounge rooms
and oftentimes they provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
They do.
So that people don't leave.
Because they don't want you to leave.
Right.
I want to leave my work. Dancing every 20 minutes. It was great.
That's,
that was too much.
Well summarized, Nicole, and very tangible example. And actually, the book gives some examples similar to what you're describing. Yeah, and certainly, like in our region, that's probably the most profound example, like on a mass scale that we're somewhat familiar with. Does anybody else from the whole group want to add anything to that?
So it seems to me like if Quicken Loan that's why they have young people, and that's why they can never go home.
So they've definitely tailored their model really to a specific generation.
No wonder they didn't
Right.
hire me.
Yes. That we learned in a previous book. Right?
I didn't know why. I knew I had the experience, but I wasn't.
But you make a great point, and the book actually talks about this. So depending upon your staff, you can tailor models or programs, if you will, to service different generations. Yeah.
I'm gonna give up.
It's a healthy observation. Healthy observation. Let's shift over to Cheryl and Christine for chapter 13.
Our chapter was regarding knowledge transfer. How do people learn the best and pick things up? And so, starting with the traditionalists, they watch and listen. And so this goes back to when they had jobs, they were a lot of hands-on jobs in the farms or factories, and only 25% were high school graduates. So basically you watched others perform the jobs and tasks at hand, and you learned by watching. And baby boomers learn the same way because they were often taken under the wing of the traditionalists, and so that's how they were taught. And the only real difference was that there was more passing on of stories. Back in my generation, this is how I did it, and passing on those unwritten rules orally through one generation passing it on to the next. By the Gen Xers, the oral tradition was stronger. Still a lot of oral passing on of how to do things, but the Gen Xers started to document it more, so there'd be written record of what was going on. And then the millennials, their way that they like to learn the most is video. And one of the lines in there I thought was interesting was that for any millennial, they have watched a video within the last 24 hours. It's very likely that they have.
Yes.
And that's being generous, probably.
It's the language of the generation with the video. And that also goes along with search engines or facts or anything online type of learning, but often video. Whereas I am a Gen Xer, and then I think that a video is going to slow me down. I'd rather read what's written, you know, just give me the words, I'll read it and be done. A video, what's it going to be, like 3-4 minutes? And then if you find it on the first search, you know, so I don't know, that's just how I think about it.
I have noticed our corporation is swaying over to more and more videos. Fraternity.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of it's still written.
Yeah. And then when you think about children, you know, like our kids need videos. They need, you know, to see what's going on. Because that's the language of the generation.
It's a robust summary, especially when you think about in some of the social media outlets, right? It's 140 characters or less. And so it's a combination of images plus words, you know, and you're kind of meeting the needs of various generations. But you're starting to see that shift that Lori pointed out. So, for sure. Anybody else want to add anything additional? Or Cheryl, did you want to add anything additional?
She summed it up really well.
So one driving force too, nice job on a comprehensive summary, but I did just want to share a point to ponder. So on page 160, at the very bottom, in the bottom paragraph, it's talking about how a lot of baby boomers postponed the concept of retirement, and because, to Nicole's point, because a lot of baby boomers find the work fun in and of itself, that they've postponed retirement. But in addition to that, I just wanted to highlight one of the driving forces behind it, and it says, the Great Recession and the collapse of home values and 401ks temporarily postpone their plans, talking about baby boomers. But the number of boomers retiring will increase and continue to increase until 2030. By then, 1 in 5 Americans will be over the age of 65, compared to 1 in 8 right now. And so I don't know if anybody's paid attention with the upcoming census. They started to talk about how a lot of countries are aging in the overall population. And so here's another highlight of that too. And it said, the entire United States will soon resemble Florida. Not only will our younger employees need the boomers' knowledge, they will also need to know how to relate to them, because in 2030, some younger boomers will still be working, and the rest of them will be their customers. And so when you think about it, like just after the new year, it's 10 years away, where you're going from 1 in 8 over 65 to 1 in 5 over 65. And so it's driving the demand for that knowledge transfer. So just, you know, again, kind of going back to our jumping off point about the why. So I just wanted to highlight that. Transitioning over to Amy and Shirley's group. So we're going to talk about loyalty in chapter 14.
So the chapter really discusses how actually, you know, we need to get over some of our biases and stereotypes, and that really all of the groups value security, believe it or not, even though it manifests itself in different ways. So I don't know, as we talked about it, kind of it became evident, like the traditionalists and the baby boomers, not that they're all one and the same, but because of some of the things like that Christine and Cheryl described, you know, they moved through their job security and organization through, you know, by watching and learning and then advancing young, really, and then staying. And so that became perceived as loyalty, whereas, you know, the opportunities amongst for a Gen Xer and even different for millennials is, you know, you're going to look for opportunities to advance. Sometimes that means leaving, but there is sort of that need to take care of your own advancement a little bit more than from a Gen X and millennial. That doesn't suggest that loyalty doesn't exist. It does compare, you know, we think about, like, I've been with South Redford for 25 years. I never thought, and I'm at the beginning of Gen X, just to give like I like to say, beginning-ish.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that, but but it talks about, you know, when you're within an organization, even for the millennial.
Mhm.
But then it talks about loyalty could be as little as like a 3-year time period, right? I mean, I think about when you talk about what's the typical life of a superintendent, right?
Oh, sure.
In most instances, but the idea that even a millennial, you're going to look for opportunities to grow, but you may need to pursue those on your own. If you're happy with the organization, then why not just try a different job in the organization? If in fact that isn't something that, you know, that suits you. Whereas maybe for the Gen Xer it means, you know, or even the baby boomer, it means, you know, there might be a need, you know, to leave if need be. So it's kind of what, you know, the world was brought around, the desire for loyalty and security, but also meeting that need is there. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, I haven't read, it's been a while since I looked at this book, to read from the chapter, but so I'm trying to get my sense today, so feel free to add things.
One thing I just wanted to add was with technology, the millennials, they might not find another job, but they will find a different job within the company because they still like the security. So I thought that was pretty amazing too, because normally I wouldn't think. I look at my daughter, and if she don't like it, she just goes somewhere else. You know, she don't even look for anything. She just goes to another job.
Yeah.
So I told her, I said, you're not going to even have Social Security.
Yeah. Healthy takeaways.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
In my previous employment, we would send people overseas, and pretty large capital to get them overseas and to train them and to language acquisition and enculturation and all of those things. And it used to be that people would look at that as a career in their mind 20, 30 years. The current people would still articulate that as career, and when pressed as what that means, they're all in for 3, 4 years, and there's a different way of looking at things.
Very much so. I know it wasn't too long ago we had a teaching candidate that shared with the interview panel. So we said, you know, forecast out for us, you know, about, you know, what other things beyond the classroom might you have aspirations toward, and thinking about, you know, personal and professional goals. And the candidate candidly said, in 3 to 5 years, I'm not sure if I'm going to be teaching, because I'm going to go do X, Y, or Z. And that was the first time that we as an interview panel had heard it. And so that was a game changer for us, you know. So, because then you think about building a team and building a department, you know. We ended up going with a different candidate. Not because of that answer, but it was one of those things where it was a new moment for our interview panel, and you know, so we just, you can kind of see what Steve's talking about. So, yeah.
Well, you really couldn't plan it.
Right. Yeah, and so it was interesting though, I think, because you think about, you know, to Steve's point, all the investment and the time and the training, and if somebody has student loans and, you know, all these things that go into it, and to think that they might leave education to go, you know, do something else in that short of a period of time. It's not uncommon, you know, as we read, for people to shift, but and then to hear it in an interview format was just, it was a new response that we had yet to hear. So we've only heard it one time, so, but something to listen to. So we're actually going to switch over to a video, if you would be so kind. But while Amy's setting that up, it's the basketball.
Yeah.
And so, but while she's doing that, on page 172, number 1, I did want to just kind of connect to what Nicole was sharing, but specifically with loyalty in the workplace. Nicole talked about this, and so did Christine, when they talked about an agrarian society. And so if you look at number 1 on page 172, a perfect example of loyalty to traditionalists. So our last example was a boomer example. This is a traditionalist example. It said, in the 1950s, Sears Roebuck and Company pioneered mandatory retirement at age 65 to keep employees in their 30s and 40s loyal to the company. It ensured that they would know when they might receive their next promotion, because they knew when each management position would then turn over. And then Certainly number 2 is also interesting too in terms of discrimination in the workplace. But then if you continue down past that, it goes on to say it was true. If the traditionalists took care of the farm took care of them. Organizations gave the traditionalists clear career paths, security, and more money to stay. And of course, the traditionalists, in return, overall, were pretty loyal. But on the heels of the passing of Kobe Bryant, I wanted to have Amy play this brief clip. We're not going to watch the full clip. But on the heels of his passing, to pay tribute, you're going to hear him talk about his loyalty to Los Angeles and to the Lakers. And so he's a Gen Xer. He's actually a cusper, so he's like right at the tail end of a Gen Xer, borderline millennial. And he's 41 years old and passed away yesterday, but kind of an interesting video. Here you'll hear him talk about the loyalty to the Lakers. And when you think about being an athletic icon to the sport, and you think about how athletes during his career jumped around, right? And so it's kind of interesting, and I thought it correlated with our book study, and very timely, of course, and so a tribute to he and his family. So we're going to listen to the first minute and a half, and you'll have an opportunity to listen in.
Hey, guys, you know, it's, I can't believe how fast 20 years went by. Man, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And, you know, to be standing here at center court with you guys, my teammates behind me, and appreciating all this, you know, the journey that we've been on. You know, we've been through our ups and been through our downs. And I think the most important part is that we all stayed together throughout. You know, I grew up a diehard Laker fan. Diehard. I mean, I knew everything about every player that's ever played here. So to be drafted and then traded to this organization and to spend 20 years here, I mean, you can't write something better than this. And I'm more proud of the fact that not about the championships, but about the down years. Because we didn't run. We played through all that stuff, and we got our championships, and we did it the right way. And all I can do here is just thank you guys. Thank you guys for all the years of support. Thank you guys for all the motivation. Thank you for all the inspiration. And, you know, what's funny,
We're gonna stop there.
the thing that had me cracking up all night.
So you can kind of hear his Gen X voice coming out, right? But similarly to what Amy just mentioned, you hear him speak to the opportunities within the organization, even going back to when he was a child, right? And talking about always being a Lakers fan and being drafted by a different team. And then, again, in the era where athletic icons would jump from team to team and name your price and you go, he stayed there, and how they did it together, and people came and went and changed positions. He even changes his number, you know, from 8 to 24. And so the changes along the way, but you hear the loyalty just in an example of a Gen Xer. So thought it was pretty pertinent given the tragedy that happened yesterday. So anybody want to add anything to that? You know, you think about Joe Montana, he jumped around. There's contemplation Tom Brady's going to jump around, right? LeBron James jumped around, Shaquille O'Neal jumped around. So, kind of interesting. We're going to transition over to Steve's table. If you'd be so kind. And then also, if you could work your books into your table summary. And perhaps the possible connection there.
We will try our best. My new best friends here and I talked about meeting agendas. What should organizations consider when structuring a meeting agenda? With the 3 main points, make the meeting meaningful, okay? Do we really need to meet, or is there another way that is more effective in the communication? perhaps based on who's going to be there, but even if there's all 4 generations there, what might hit them best. Secondly, a common understanding of the intent of the meeting. Is it informational? Is it brainstorming? Is it decision making? So that we all know what we're going into. Third one, different formats in the same meeting. He had a good point about kind of catering to each generation. So having maybe PowerPoint, but also emailing that same PowerPoint to others and videoing it so that it hits each of the generations where they fit. I loved his idea about grabbing attention. Tell me about the thought for it.
So at work, right, I've got guys that are in their 60s all the way down to their 20s. And just like we're talking about with the different, you get their attention differently, but, you put a hot bag of popcorn in front of them. It's like going to the movies, man. They just sit there and look at you, and they're ready to learn. It's the craziest thing ever, but yeah, we have a popcorn maker, we buy popcorn, and they just...
And they're engaged. Yeah.
They're ready to go.
Yeah, I believe it. That's a good example.
Yeah.
Good example. And that's a perfect example that correlates with what the author talks about, is looking for those things that bring all generations together. So that's a good one.
And we might be able to do that when we're watching the videos of how to do things.
Yes, very true. The YouTube videos. And what are the book titles that you have over there?
I have not read this one. It's written by Dr. Seuss's brother, Dr. Seuss. All the meetings you'll go to. It looks very fascinating, and I might borrow it from Mr. J. Bob. This one I have read, Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni, who's famous primarily for his 5 dysfunctions of a team. That's his bestseller and a fabulous book. And this one is also very good.
Mm-hmm.
More of a fable kind of storytelling that he does. And yeah, I've been that guy in that meeting.
Yeah.
I've led meetings like that guy.
So the connection and the reason why I brought those books along tonight is I'm not endorsing either one of those titles. I'm just I merely wanted to just highlight for the group that it is one of the main sticking points for the 4 generations, because the expectations for a meeting differ tremendously. And so the book that Steve's holding, it talks about how organizations try to grapple with exactly that. So if it's the popcorn machine that brings people together, and the purpose for the meeting, perhaps there's a way that you can maximize it, but the expectations for all 4 different generations are different. And so and the impact that has on how organizations, when they do meet, what's the purpose and what's on the agenda, and are people watching the clock or whatever it may be, and things to ponder. But as you can see, there's a demand for it, and then there's the parody of the other book, which is now being marketed to millennials about all of the great meetings that you're going to go to, because it's really one of the unsolved dilemmas in the American workplace is what to do with meetings. And what the purpose is behind them, and that varies greatly. So you think about all the committees that all of you serve on, and how the purposes for those committees even differ tremendously from the work that you do as a board. So, anything you want to add, Shirley?
I just have a comment. We deal with our young adults, and I had to get used to texting, and they might be sitting here and somebody else is right there, and they're texting. So what I did, I didn't do the popcorn, I'm going to try that, but what I did, I would bring snacks for them. Mm-hmm. And that kind of, kept them together, but it really got to me, because I said, wait a minute, guys, and you going to help me out here or what? Because I wasn't used to that.
Sure.
And one of the young fellas said to me, it's not that you're boring, Miss Tolliver, it's just that we could have did this by email. And I'm saying, never thought of that.
Right.
So, we did do some by email, but I had to get used to that.
Yeah.
It was different.
Yeah. And there's certainly an evolution. It's a wonderful
Yeah.
example. Anybody else want to add?
I know we do a lot of training with Skype.
Mm-hmm.
We get people in California,
Mhm.
Texas.
And to your earlier point, there you have the image and you have the words, right? So whether you're verbal or image, you kind of have both. So, right.
So, as most of you know, over the weekend I brought my daughter and her fiance back from North Carolina to Michigan, and one of the reasons they're coming back is that he's going to be the sales manager, or he's going to be the sales rep for his company of all of Michigan. And so we're talking, and of course I want this guy to have a good, solid job, right? And I know it's crazy business, but they don't have an office. They only have their main offices in Charlotte, and that's the only place. So you probably get a lot of miles flying back and forth and going to the sales meetings and stuff. I don't think I'll ever really have to go back to Charlotte. I'm like, no, you have to go back to Charlotte because you need to be in those meetings and you need to make sure you're making a salary and you got security and start talking pension.
You're beginning to sound like a traditionalist.
So my daughter looks at me and he goes, why would he ever go there? Because he'll just Skype in the meetings. I'm like, I get that once in a while, but you can't do that all the time. And I still don't get it. I don't understand how it's going to do it. I guess I'm going to find out. But he doesn't anticipate ever having to go back to Charlotte. And he will just, there's no Detroit office. He's going to work out of his house. And that's how it's going to be.
But not your.
Did not my house. So anyways, so that was kind of interesting. And you know, we wrestled this a little bit. You look back at me, but when we were talking about meetings, and I had a little temper tantrum with our administrators, you know, and in the use of technology and stuff in our meeting and stuff, and so that's how I had to wrestle with it.
Did you say little?
Yeah, I did say little because I'm in front of my bosses here, but we, you know, we're working our way through it, and I don't know, I'm still not convinced. I'll keep reading.
I got news for you. They even have IT people that you can have an issue with your computer and you can send in an IM through Skype.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know what? They can sign on to my computer while I'm on it and see what I'm doing to find out what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah.
Or what is going on wrong.
Yeah. You were doing it wrong. So but yeah, it is. So we're wrestling with the same things.
For sure. There's definitely an evolution to it. No question. No question.
Yeah, the other side of that is that my son telecommutes from Texas to Boston, and he misses out on the water cooler talk, and it's not necessarily gossip. It may be just informational or something, and so he doesn't know something occurred or we're going in this direction because it was all just kind of bandied about within the office, and he's missed that. It wasn't a formal meeting. It was just kind of. So that's the other side of that.
Yeah. I agree. I think all those things are so important.
Yeah.
And so
It's
Well,
going.
we've gotten a new thing in the procedures that go with it. Started out a month ago, they were this thing. Okay. One of the girls went to print it today. It's 243 pages now.
Oh,
so it's this thick.
Oh my.
And I go, why do you even print it? And she goes, well, I like to have the paper. And I went, but it changes weekly. You know.
Yeah.
You figure you're doing 230 pages weekly.
All wonderful points, and in fact, to those points that are being mentioned with this topic is that workplaces and organizations are grappling with this now about working from home versus coming in or having both, you know. And then to Steve's point, if some people are there on Mondays and Wednesdays and other people are there on Tuesdays and Thursdays, when do they, you know, and then so Friday do they connect? And so you're seeing organizations and companies kind of grapple with this, and it's going to be interesting to see, like in the next 3 to 5 years, you know, which industries land where they do for both of the points that your future son-in-law and your son have voiced, because some have gone to working home and now they're starting to bring people back, or they're doing this combo deal. So you're kind of seeing this play out literally right now. And then certainly I think it means different things in different industries. So it'll be exciting to watch.
Could we as a district hire a teacher that teaches remotely?
Kid learns remotely. Like so.
Possibly. Possibly.
Well, I
Possibly.
mean, you look at a lot of university courses. The
Mhm.
last few years I did some of the master's work that I didn't spend many now. They're hybrid courses or online
Yeah.
courses. There wasn't a course available that wasn't hybrid, which was a portion in person, a portion online. But one of the best ones I had was, and I still remember that. Can't remember what the class was. It's irrelevant. But we were going to have to work in groups online. The first day or the first session, the first week, we met at the university. And we did some team building things. Hi, get to know your team, discuss who you are. Then we got online with each other. And that was the teacher had some experience in, social work or sociology or something like that. So,
So she knew the psychology behind it.
Yeah, he had that sense behind it. So I always think about that when I think about the idea of flipping instruction or hybrid or
Yeah, and the book actually talks about Yeah. Good thoughts.
Classes like that we work. I had a humanity class and we met 4 times the whole semester. And we did everything online. And every time we met, we had a test and we had to do a paper and turn it in. Wasn't bad.
Yeah.
But it got used, you had to get used to doing that.
There are some successful formats that are out there. And a lot are kind of going back to what Amy talked about, doing kind of some sort of team building first and then, or to Shirley's point, what the format is so everybody knows going in. So kind of interesting. So with that, we'll transition to Brian and Lori for policies and procedures.
Can I go?
Your heroes.
Okay.
I just throw temper tantrums at meetings.
Little. Little. I can imagine. Okay. We kind of started off in one direction, talking about the views and the policies. That it has to be like your customer focus. There again, like they were saying earlier, if your customer focus is older people, you're going to want to present the traditional way of dressing. If they're younger people, you may be able to get away with some of the flip-flops and jeans and other things. But and then we talked about having a clear policy, but not policy ourselves into a corner by making them so hard and fast. And then that's when we started talking about the difference between policy or guidelines, as an underbody to them. And then we kind of went to baby boomers wanted clear directions to follow and input so that it made sense. And Brian had at first said fair, and I said, it's not necessarily going to be fair, but it has to make sense. And then the traditionalists, they like the hard rules, like this is the way it's done. You have to do this part first, then this part. And the Gen Xers just didn't feel like it was all that important. As
Keep
long
in
as it
mind,
got done.
those were our MTV generation people that we had looked at when we talked about the why. So, right?
And we never really made it down to the millennials. We kept getting interrupted.
It's all right. Anybody want to add anything? Healthy takeaways. I think one of the most powerful things in policies is that they talk about that whatever you have, it cannot negatively impact the organization's bottom line or their core function, which I think again takes you back to the why. So if you're going to have a policy, why do you have the policy? For what reasons do you have the policy? And does it support the organization, or is it a detriment? You know, because it could be perceived 4 different ways by the 4 different generations. So Amy, if you'd be so kind to cue up our final video. And so we're going to flip to wrap up our work tonight. Page 165, it talks about the importance behind leveraging our generational differences for the betterment of the organization. Kind of similar to the popcorn, about how it brings people together. And so this is kind of fun. So it reads, when I was growing up, this is number 4 at the top of page 165. When I was growing up, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups ran the now classic TV ads, which showed 2 people colliding, one eating a chocolate bar and the other eating from a jar of peanut butter. They would then complain, "You got your peanut butter in my chocolate, and you got your chocolate in my peanut butter," until they discovered that the combination was surprisingly tasty. That set up Hershey's long-running slogan, "2 great tastes that taste great together." It made the point obvious. Instead of fighting the differences, leverage them. The same thing applies to knowledge transfer. Xers and millennials watch videos online. Boomers like to tell stories. This one is a no-brainer. And so we were able to find this video, and I'm going to go ahead and pass the candy out.
Two great tastes that taste great together. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Real milk chocolate, delicious peanut butter. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And Reese's Crunchy Peanut Butter Cups topped with chopped peanuts.
What happened to those?
I remember this.
So perhaps you remember that commercial. That commercial, I think, is closing in on 40 years old.
Wow.
But I do have some Reese's Peanut Butter Cups if you would like to indulge. But again, I just wanted to close out tonight's book study that we are better when we embrace our generational differences than we are when we isolate them. And so enjoy some peanut butter and chocolate together. And I can't help but connect it to our Covey work also. You know, it's kind of the whole seeking win-win when, you know, he talks about 1 + 1 can sometimes equal 3 or 4 or 5. And so I think in a lot of ways when we embrace our generational differences, we can arrive at the same outcome. So think about that each time you have a peanut butter and chocolate together. So, Madam President, that concludes tonight's book study.
Very good.
Thank you, neither one of us was on the clock right now.
9:16.
So that was just great.